I'm Dick Pusateri, the Military and Veteran Services Manager. Welcome to our African American Military Heritage Celebration. I'm honored to introduce our esteemed guest, Major General Craig Timberlake, United States Marine Corps retired. General Timberlake is just a very appropriate speaker for this event because he had the type of career that covered all the bases. He's literally a private to general kind of guy, served 7 years in the enlisted ranks, was a staff sergeant, senior drill instructor, and then went on to just a great Marine Corps infantry career. Led in combat, led in other operations, ended up the commanding general, the 3rd MARDIV, and worked as the deputy commander of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force in the Western Pacific, had great impact in our alliances in Japan, Republic of Korea, Thailand, Philippines, Australia, and just generations of Marines benefited from his great leadership. As we remember today our African American military heritage, it's good for us to just recall how many years we just ignored this heritage. As long as there was the United States, there have been African Americans who have defended our country from the Revolutionary War on. When we think of the Civil War, for many, many years we forgot 200,000 African Americans fought for their freedom, literally won their freedom through combat, raised their hands. And as an exemplar of that experience, I turned to Henry Mack, the last living African-American veteran of the Civil War. He died at age 107 in 1945 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Henry was born a slave in Alabama. He escaped slavery during the Civil War and he enlisted in the 57th Colored Infantry. He fought in combat, and then following the war, he continued his enlistment and served in the far west, what later became the Buffalo Soldiers, became a corporal, got out, ended up moving north, and lived a long life. And one of the great prides of that life is that he was a veteran of the Grand Army of the Republic. And amazingly, for the time he lived, in his old age, in his fellowship, and after he died, he was honored by his white brothers who also served. And he was lifted up as one of those band of brothers who fought for freedom. Today, I like to think the many thousands who serve in the U.S. military continue to support and fight when necessary for our freedom, for our liberty, for equality. I like to think African Americans and all their brothers and sisters are putting it on the line to keep the American idea of democracy and the value of every individual alive. But it's good, as we turn to our African American heritage, to think of people like Henry Mack, people who didn't have all the promise of freedom in our country, people who didn't have all the opportunity, but still they raised their hands, they committed themselves, they supported and defended our Constitution and made our country the great country that it can be. Thanks.
Good day. I'm Michael Martinez-Sachs, Dean of Students at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. During this Black History Month, I want to say a special thanks to our African American veterans and service members who are currently or have been in service of the U.S. military. African Americans have fought for the United States from the Revolutionary War to the current time. They have served honorably, but often they have not been given the distinction and the honors deserved. On behalf of John Jay, I want to thank all veterans But during this Black History Month, I want to especially thank our African Americans who have served so valiantly and honorably in the U.S. Armed Forces. At this time, I would also like to thank Major General Timberlake for honoring us at John Jay College with his presence and his words during this Black History Month celebration. Thank you so much, General Timberlake, for being our guest at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag and the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vonnie Ricks, and I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran, and I'm making this video to share with you all what African American military heritage means to me. And to me, it means everything. That the African American man and woman that went before me made it possible, yes, possible for me, that regardless of my sex, regardless of my skin tone, that I was able to serve and to fight for my country. And this is just a little fun fact, but in 1942, the United States Marine Corps was literally the last branch to admit blacks. That right there just goes to show how far we have came as a country and as American people. And even though I'm a veteran, I am still willing to fight for those same rights. And I hope you all are too. I just want to say thank you for your support, and happy Black History Month, you all.
Being an African American in the military, it was an amazing experience, to be honest with you. Growing up, I had nothing. Growing up, I had no food. I had very little interaction with the environment around me. And the military allowed me to experience the world for what it is. I was able to go to many different places and enjoy those different places with the people that I worked with. Even though I'm not going to say that all of these different places and experiences were good, because some of them were racially stimulated and negative on that front. I remember being in Rome, and this guy hit me with this car. I was out there working as a diplomat, and this guy hit me with this car and drove off because he had this preconception that I was just an normal African local, and that shouldn't even be a conceptual thought within someone's head. I also remember the good times where I made friends that you would not believe that I would make. Someone from Alabama or Kentucky, straight out of, the most racist areas, and some of them shared their experiences with me and how their perceptions were changed from their interaction with me. It's kind of disheartening to state that my interactions have to be the initial judgment point for people who were in the military and who are in the military, because most of them have not seen a person with my skin tone and complexion before. Being African American within the military as well has also made me stronger and much more convicted in the fact that I am good how I am. I suffered through, for a very long time, the sadness and the unhappiness because I felt like my skin color was what hampered me from being able to do all great things that I wanted to do. I also had a feeling, that in my heart of hearts, that my skin tone and complexion made life more difficult for me. So I was running from the ideology of my skin tone and complexion. And then I had to sit down and realize that through and through, you have to love yourself who you are. And the military did teach me that. I met people that articulated that to me. Another African American military personnel named Amos. He directed me to, hey man, listen, your color does not define who you are. Your color should be something that is embraced and loved by yourself. You shouldn't be running away from that. And through that, I was able to accept myself for who I am. Because in a lot of occasions, like I said, deferred from I started running away from my color. I started running away from my ethnicity. I started running away from who I was. But through good leadership, it helps you to embrace those understandings and that key concept that you are good just the way you are. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Christopher Abdullah. It was my genuine pleasure to talk to you guys, and have an outstanding day. Thank you and goodbye.
Greetings. My name is Major General Craig Timberlake, United States Marine Corps retired, and I am humbled and honored truly to be here with you as we celebrate the African American military legacy and heritage. Today, I am filming from the original Chow Hall of the Army's 25th Infantry, commonly known as the Buffalo Soldiers. I am located right now aboard Fort Clark Springs in Brackettville, Texas. Also, aboard this base is the Seminole Negro Indian Scout Cemetery. And in that cemetery, there are four recipients of our nation's highest award for bravery in combat, the Medal of Honors. Those four individuals are Isaac Payne, Idam Payne, Pompey Fenton, and John Ward. And as the sun rises high, and today in the Texas sky, let it be known that the sun will never set on their bravery and fidelity, and their honor shall live forever. Now, before I get into my remarks today, there are a couple shout outs that I must give. The first one is to the educators at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Educators have always held a special place in my heart. And the reasons are twofold. The first one is they taught me it was okay, even encouraged, to spin myself in the worthy pursuit of something bigger than self. And finally, and perhaps more importantly, they taught me to never allow the zip code of my birth to determine the zip code of my final destination. That second shout out that I need to give is to Captain Richard Dick Pusateri. Now, Captain Pusateri and I go back. We've been battle buddies for nearly 30 years. And I will tell you, I find him to be today, as he has always been, an individual that is always looking out for others. You know, I don't know when Dick Pusateri found religion, but I suspect very strongly that religion found him first. And it's probably a little bit of divine intervention is why he is to where he is right now, in your life and in mine. He's helping others. You know, in my day job, I am the Chief of Student Leadership Development for a small charter school, well, 25,000, and that's small here in Texas, a small charter school in Central Texas. And the name of that school is the International Leadership of Texas. IL Texas is what we commonly call it. And in IL Texas, our motto is others before self. Dick Pusateri lives that each and every day. So thank you very much, Dick, for allowing me to be here, and thank you for what you're doing, along with the educators, what you're both doing for our veterans and especially our fellow Americans. Now, when I was thinking about what I might say here today, I kind of discussed it a little bit with my wife, and she said to me, she says, hey, look, you know your audience, right? And I go, yes, I know my audience. She says, you know, it's going to be veterans, and there are going to be a lot of former enlisted members in that group. And I go, yes, I understand that, dear. And she says, you also understand that they've probably heard a lot of general and flag officers speak. And I said, yes, I understand. And she said, you know you. And I go, yes, I kind of know me. And then I also know that she's on a roll right now. And why is she on a roll right now? Well, there's a couple of things you got to know about. And the first one is, first and foremost, probably is she's a retired Marine, Chief Warrant Officer with about 22 years of service and active duty. And she says to me, she says, finally, hey, Timberlake, do we need to discuss the 3 B's for public speaking, especially in an audience of former enlisted members? And I go, in my most patient, kind, and humble voice, no, dear, we do not. And she says, well, for grins and giggles, let's do it anyway. Repeat after me, Timberlake. The 3 B's of public speaking, especially when speaking to a group of veterans, are be there, be brief, and be gone. And so I'm going to be here, I'm going to be brief, and then, my fellow veterans, I assure you, I will be gone. And the way I'd like to do that, following those 3 B's today, is first, I'd like to talk a little bit about you. Then I'd like to talk about why we're here today. And then I'd like to talk about your contributions after you've taken the uniform off. So let's talk about you. First off, you, the veterans, you come from all walks of life. And yet you've all traveled the same path. That being a path of service to this great nation, the United States of America. And I got to tell you, while you were serving, throughout your service, you have formed these incredibly strong bonds with that brother and sister to your right and to your left right now. And those bonds are sometimes stronger than the bonds formed from amongst all the children that your mother gave birth to. And that's just the way it is. And why is it that way? Because you literally, there have been times that you've had to place your life in the hands of your brother and sister to your right and to your left. So I want to say to you, thank you very much for your service. I want you to know that America thanks you for your service, and she looks forward to you continuing doing all those great things that you've done while you're wearing a uniform. Now, for that legacy, the African American military heritage and legacy. Now, there is no way I could stand here, or anyone could stand here and talk about the legacy of the United States military without talking about the contributions of the African Americans. And I mean, if we start all the way back at the war, the Revolutionary War, the war that formed this nation, we see over 8,000 blacks fighting on the American side. When we fast forward to the Civil War, a war fought to end slavery, we find over 200,000 African Americans in the Union Army and the Union Navy. And in the Union Navy, where they made up less than 10% of the total enlisted sailor population, 7 of them were awarded Medal of Honors. In the Union Army, 7 more African Americans were awarded the Medal of Honor. So a total of 14 Medals of Honor were awarded to African Americans during the Civil War. As we move throughout our history and we go to World War I, we see nearly 400,000 African Americans in uniform, with nearly 200,000 of those forward deployed overseas on the Western Front. Now, a lot of you are from New York, and you're probably familiar with a unit called the 369th, because they come from right around the way in Harlem. They were known as the Harlem Hellfighters. The Harlem Hellfighters spent 191 days straight in trench warfare. In addition, they were awarded France's highest award for bravery for individuals and unit, the Croix de Guerre. And finally, Private Henry Johnson was awarded posthumously the Medal of Honor for his actions as a member of the Harlem Hellfighters. Moving on to World War II. World War II, we have 1 million African Americans in uniform. And even though Jim Crow is still the law of the land in a large part of America, these Americans, these African Americans, are performing historically and heroically on the battlefield, both home and abroad. And when we look at the abroad game, we see the Tuskegee Airmen. And who can forget them and their exploits serving as escorts for bombers over Europe, led by the great Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, who would go on to become the first 4-star African American in our nation's history. 4-star African American. At the same time, especially from about 1942 to 1949, there's a group of African Americans who had to fight for their right to fight. And what do I mean by that? African Americans, by the thousands, joined the United States Marine Corps, the last service to desegregate, knowing full well that they would be sent to North Carolina to a separate boot camp at a place called Montford Point in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and they wouldn't even be allowed aboard the main Marine Corps base without a white escort, the Montford Point Marines. Now, some of you will say, I don't know any Montford Point Marines, but you do. As a matter of fact, one Montford Point Marine, after service in the United States Marine Corps, went to Harvard where he graduated cum laude, became a lawyer, and became your 106th mayor of New York. The mayor of New York City, David Dinkins, God rest his soul. As we move through the rest of our nation's wars, and we go on to the Korean War, we go on to the Vietnam War, the two Gulf Wars, and the current war on terrorism. African Americans have then and now played a great part in this military legacy. So when I started, I told you there was a couple things that I wanted to do. First off, I said, hey, I want to talk to you, the veterans. And I think I have talked to you, the veterans. And then I said I wanted to talk about that legacy. And I reminded you that we can never talk about the American military legacy unless we include the efforts of the African Americans, both home and abroad. And then I said to you, I wanted to talk about your contributions now that you are no longer in uniform. And in order to do that, I need to tell you a story. You know, general officers, flag officers, they always have a story. So this is my story to you. We have talked today about so many individuals and what they did in uniform. But we also know that they went on, nearly every one of them went on to make a significant contribution to the United States once they took that uniform off. And that's what you're about ready to do. So, to my story. In 1977, as a young Marine, I was stationed aboard Royal Air Force Base, Cornwall. And Royal Air Force Base in Cornwall was in England, and it's down on the coast. And at the end of the workday, we as young Marines would go out and hang out with our British counterparts in pubs. I know it's hard for you to believe that Marines who were born in Tunn's Tavern would go to a pub, but we did. And we would go to the pub and we would do what service members have done always. We would share a libation or two, okay, sometimes three, and then we would trade war stories. And if you ever ask a Brit what operations, what contingencies, what wars that they had fought in, they would always start and conclude their answer with, hey mate, I did my bit. They wouldn't laugh at you for asking the question. They wouldn't brag. Well, as long as they were sober, they wouldn't brag. They would simply say, hey mate, I did my bit. If they never left the island, or if they fought in every contingency, war, and operation that the country participated in during their service, they would tell you, hey mate, I did my bit. Well, you all have done your bit. And whether you fought in every war, operation, deployment, or if you never left CONUS, if you never deployed overseas, you can look in the mirror and you can look at your fellow American and say, when America needed me most, I did my bit. Because you did. And now you're about ready to take off that uniform. You're going to have to do a continuation of your bit. And this is what I offer to you. 4 examples of individuals that have done their bit and then continued doing their bit once they took off the uniform and put on civilian clothes. And I'll start with Sergeant Major Michelle Jones, Michelle S. Jones. Sergeant Major Michelle S. Jones, Command Sergeant Major, the first African-American female to be the Command Sergeant Major of an Army division. Never to rest on her laurels, that wasn't all. Before she took off the uniform, she rose to the position of Command Sergeant Major for the entire United States Army Reserves. Once she put on her civilian clothes and went into retirement, her next job, her next assignment was to run the outreach programs for veterans for the President of the United States. For my second example, I offer Charles Frank Bowden Jr. The Marines in the audience will remember Major General Charlie Bowden as a fighter pilot in Vietnam, as a test pilot after Vietnam, and later on as an astronaut who logged over 680 hours in space. When General Bowden retired and put on his civilian clothes, he eventually made his way to being the head of NASA for 8 years. The head of NASA for 8 years. For my third example, I'd like to return to the United States Army and the Honorable Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin was a 4-star general in the United States Army, geographic combatant commander for Central Command when he retired, put on his civilian clothes, and on 26 January, he was confirmed as the first African-American Secretary of Defense. And then finally, I'd like to offer to you Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman. Police Officer Goodman served from 2002 to 2006 with the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, HUA, where he earned his Combat Infantryman's Badge. In 2009, he became a Capitol Police Officer. On 6 January, Capitol Police Officer Goodman led a mob of rioters, insurrectionists, away from the senators and congressmen held up in the Capitol building, took them up the ladder well to the second deck where he had reinforcements. And if you ask Senator Mitt Romney, he will tell you that that day, Eugene Goodman personally saved his life by sending him the correct way to go when he was being chased by the mob. What a continuation of his first bit. Yes, they all did their first bit, and then look at the continuation. So to you by now, my charge to you is kind of obvious. America loves you, each and every one of you, for all the things that you've done. She knows you embodies all the characteristics and traits that she wants in her fighting men and women. But more importantly, those are the same traits and characteristics that she wants in all of her American citizens. So, in 20 years from now, if I'm a betting man, and I am, when I'm sitting at home surrounded by my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, and we are listening to a tribute to the African-American legacy, I suspect very strongly I will hear the names of someone in this audience. And my only question to you is, will it be you? Will it be you? Or will it be you? In closing, again, let me say thank you to the staff here at John Jay's College of Criminal Justice. Thank you to Captain Dick Pusateri for all that you're doing for our veterans. And thank you, veterans, for all that you have done for America. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Timberlake out.